Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to head to England once again. We're going to go to London, which has a lot of craft beer activity these days, and we're going to revisit a brewery who I've only reviewed one thing from before. And as I always say, if you want to see how good a craft brewery is, you want something from the dark end of the spectrum and something from the lighter end of the spectrum. And for this one we're going to try my first beer on the darker end of the spectrum from these guys. But this is a brewery that gets a hell of a lot of plaudits, and from the last beer that I had, I was starting to understand why with these guys. So for this one, we are going to go to the Kernal Brewery, which is, as I say, is from London. They're from the Bermondsey area in the city, and we're having a taste of their Double India Porter today. The hops in this one are Mosaic and Bramling's Cross, and it comes in at 7.5% ABV, so should be a really interesting one. This Mosaic, of course, gives you a lot of tangerine orange kind of flavours, a little bit of blueberry, and the Bramling's Cross, I'm guessing they'll probably have used that as more of a bittering hop in this one, because it gives you a little bit of that earthy, kind of herbal, floral, grassy, English hop type thing. So very curious to see how this particular beer turns out. But at 7.5%, it pretty much is on the kind of edge of things that you can describe as being as an imperial porter. For me, the 7.5% mark is really where the border is between the regular type beers and the imperial or double sort of thing. So yeah, very curious to see how this one turns out. The last beer I had from these guys was a table beer, which was really nice, a Belgian style beer, and I really liked how that one turned out. So very curious, as I said, to see how they do with something on the darker side of the spectrum. So I hope you guys enjoy my take on this beer as well. This, of course, was another beer in the second lot of small partiers that we had through Systembolaget here in Sweden in November of 2018. So yeah, we'll see how we get on with this. So anyway, as is usual with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from the Kernal Brewery before. No doubt I will add some more in the near future. There's all the usual social media. If you want to see more beer reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the home page and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlist of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the English beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to, and as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about the Kernal Brewery then. So as I mentioned to you before, the Kernal Brewery are based in Bermondsey in London. They were founded by Evan O'Riordan, who's originally from Ireland, but he was apparently inspired to get into brewing by friends in New York after they took him to a beer bar, and he was blown away by the fact that they just had a completely different approach in New York, and the focus was basically on the beer rather than actually on it being a kind of regular pint or a regular bar when they were drinking beers. They really wanted a kind of tasting experience from their beers basically, and that was what really kind of stuck in Evan's mind. But he'd been working with cheese for a long time with Neil's Yard Dairy, and he'd actually been to New York to help Whole Foods set up a cheese room, and he was quite well versed and became fascinated in when he could meet new people, and he met a lot of new people who were just very knowledgeable about beer, and again this was something that just stuck in his mind. And then he decided to get into brewing. He read the books of Charlie Papazan, and then he joined the London Amateur Brewing setup, and when he moved to London he apparently discovered Brewdog Punk IPA, and it helped convince him that more and more people were becoming interested in these American style craft beers. So the brewery started up in a railway arch with only a 600 litre kit, and they've been growing ever since, but they stick mainly to brewing lighter kind of hoppy beers, but they do the occasional sort of sour beer and dark beer and things like this. To have a beer like this is a little bit more of a kind of rare occasion, I guess you would say, for the Kernal Brewery. But apparently all the people that are working for the brewery take turns at brewing the beer, and there's one member of staff brews on average one day every fortnight at the brewery, which is pretty cool actually. So all these different beers that you're getting brewing, it's different people just having a go at different things. So in a way, Kernal Brewery, from what I understand, do not have a regular range. They're always just, you know, mucking around with different hops and different beer styles and things like that. And this is yet another one of the products that they've tried. But I would be interested to know with Kernal, because from what I understand, with Systembolaget here in Sweden, you need to have the recipe ready for them like a year before and let them taste it and everything. I'd be really interested to know how they decided that it would be this one that they would send across. But I know that Systembolaget have slots, you know, they'll say, oh, we'll take one porter and one stout and all this kind of thing here. I'd be really interested to know how the Kernal Brewery decided which one it was that they were actually going to produce, because as I say, most of their beers that they do are like lighter, sort of hoppier beers, but it's quite unusual to come across something that's a little bit darker in my experience. But of course it is very, very welcome. But yeah, that's all you really need to know about this brewery just now. As I say, quite a small operation, but very, very prolific in terms of their output of different beers. So one of the London breweries that you definitely want to check out. There's a lot of very interesting things going on in London these days, and you know, Craig over at Kent Beer Reviews is probably the man that will keep you up to date with that. He's reviewing a lot of things from the kind of southeast area of England, so check out his channel if you get the chance. But yeah, that's all you really need to know about the brewery just now. If you want to learn a little bit more, do check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram and things like that, and keep up to date with all the regular goings on. But let's get on to the actual tasting of this beer itself, and I'm very curious to see how this one turns out. So yeah, in this case with the Kernal, you know, it's one of these kind of very simple hipster type artworks. I'll just turn the computer off. We don't really need the brewery notes for this one anymore, but it's one of these kind of typical sort of artisanal hipstery type artworks that done this very, very simple, just like a kind of cardboard, the sort of inside lining of cardboard and things like that actually. But yeah, bottle conditioned beer on the back, 7.5%. Not much more to say about it, to be honest, just a plain bottle cap on this one. It would be cool actually if the Kernal did, you know, this kind of colour bottle cap with just, you know, Kernal in black writing or something like that on it. That would be a nice touch for it, but I guess it's probably a bit expensive for them to do that. But it says on the side here, bottled on the 13th of September 2018, and it's best before the 13th of September 2019. And as I say, this was released in the second lot of small partiers in November of 2018 here. So by the time that this was released, it had been in the bottle just about 2 months, which, you know, is a pretty good time when it comes to one of these darker beers. I've criticised Systembolaget before for taking a while to get the IPAs and things like that out that are from imports, but when it comes to the darker beers such as this one, to be honest, it doesn't really matter when it's that length of time. But when you open this beer up, you really can smell some sweet chocolatey and roasty type malts out of this one. So let's get it out and into the glass. Just watch that we don't get too big a head on this one. That one's going to go a little bit crazy, but it will, I'm sure, settle down. We'll just pour this little bit of it in. But look at that. I think I poured that one just a little touch too aggressively, but there is still just a little bit in the bottom of the bottle there. You've got the dregs down at the bottom here. But yeah, look at that. As you would expect, a nice hazy, well, not even hazy, just a nice, I was meaning it's got a nice big dark tan head on it, this one. I don't know why I said hazy actually, but yeah, nothing surprising about the appearance of this one. A lovely dark ebony rosewoody colour out of this one. Solid sort of 3 fingers of a frothy, I would say dark beige tan head on this one. It's almost like a kind of hot chocolate coffee type head on this. Let's just break a few of the bubbles there. There's a big sort of hollow point in the middle of that beer. That'll help it collapse a little bit. But yeah, it looks really nice and nothing overall surprising in terms of the appearance of this beer, but it looks really nice. And as I say, when I opened this one up, it did smell very, very sweet. Let's just put the last little bit of this in and see if that contributes anything to the aroma there. You can see there's a little bit of sediment just popping out in this one. Look at that. That's a very, very good pour, I think. But yeah, I was maybe a little bit aggressive with it to get that size of head on this beer. But yeah, it looks almost like a kind of ice cream float or something, to be honest. But yeah, with this beer, in terms of appearance, it looks absolutely beautiful. But let's take a closer look at that aroma then and just see how we get on with this one. And see, straight away with that Bramling's cross hop, that comes out of this straight away. You know, the thing I've always described with English hops is that they have this very distinct earthiness. It's almost like some of them can even have a slightly earthy, or slightly ashy earthy quality to them, I should say. And that one, it was always the Fuggles hop that I always remembered in that regard. You know, the Fuggles hop was really sort of, it just had this almost cigarette ash type thing about it. And the Bramling's Cross, I remember, I've not had too many beers with Bramling's Cross in them, but you can really smell that earthy, ashy sort of thing coming out of this beer straight away. There's a good little bit of chocolate in there. You can smell that there's a bit of a kind of high cocoa chocolate sweetness to this beer. There's definitely some roasted black malts backing that up. but that's mixing in very much with this sort of earthy, almost ashy hoppy quality from the beer. There's a lot of earthy ashy notes coming out. The hops almost have a little bit of a floral, herbal type thing as well, and you can pick up there is a little bit of a kind of citrusy, that sort of grassy citrusy note in this one. And I always find this interesting, you know, the German hops have that very typical, you know, the noble hops have this very typical grassy floral kind of character to them, but the English hops smell, you know, have this really distinctive character as well, that more earthy, herbal, floral type thing to them, and you can definitely pick that up in this beer straight away. You can pick up a little bit of the orangey notes from this one, the tangerine orange from the Mosaic, and it's interesting that. I'm very curious to see if this turns out to be a sort of chocolate orangey type imperial porter. But in terms of the malt base, for me, there is definitely a bit of brown sugar in there, like a sort of toasty caramel or something. Lots of toasty brown sugars, sweet chocolatey sweet, more high cocoa chocolate out of this one. Roasted black malt backbone in there, and a little bit of a, as I say, there's a bit of that ashy kind of note mixing in with it there. It does smell like it's not the most pungent of aromas, this beer, but it's definitely one that kind of captures your interest a little bit. So as I always say, just take a little bit of time and enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. But I'm just very, very curious to try this one. I'm maybe not spending as much time on the aroma with this beer as I should, so maybe I'll comment on that through the tasting a little bit. But this one is, to give it its correct name, this is the India Double Porter Mosaic and Bramling's Cross from the Kernel Brewery in the Bermondsey area in London, in England. Let's get stuck into this one then. Sláinte, skål. Oh yeah. I'll say straight away, that's a solid beer. It's definitely more along the lines, it's interesting because it does have a little bit of that, you know, old English traditional beer style edge to it, but at the same time it's got a little bit more of the punchiness that you would expect of an American beer. Yeah, I'll say straight away with this, thumbs up to Kernal Brewery on this. They have done a good job with this beer, but you know, at the same time, I'm not overly surprised. You know, these guys have got a reputation for a reason. This beer for me is it's just very, very solid. It's a really nice one to drink. So let's just try and break down the malt base of this beer. So in the middle of your palate, you can feel just underpinning this whole thing, there's that nice roasty black malt backbone to this beer. On top of that, and the further into the aftertaste you go, you start to get more of the, there is an element of a breadiness to this beer. The difference, of course, between the porter and the stout is usually the mouthfeel. The stout mouthfeel is a little bit thicker and a little bit creamier, and this one, to be fair to it, it does start to push into that category a little bit, but normally the yeast strain that they use in this one is the same that they'll use in a golden ale or something like that. You know, it's really the yeast that gives the beer a lot of the mouthfeel in a lot of different styles. But for me, this one, it's very, very smooth, but at the thing I really like about it is that it definitely has that old English porter kind of quality to it, but it's got a little bit more of the kind of American punchiness. It's a really interesting concoction, this beer. And one thing, you know, I've never been a great fan of the traditional English beers on the lighter side of things. I've always liked the porters and the stouts, and some of the milds can be very nice as well, and the brown ales and stuff like that. I've never been a great fan of English golden ales and stuff, but as I say, I really like when you've got the Bramling's Cross in this beer, it does give it a little bit more of that kind of traditional English edge, and when you've got the Mosaic hop in there, it's got a little bit of that American, that kind of New World American sort of thing too. So yeah, in the centre of your palate then, to me there is a little touch of brown sugar in there. It's almost like a well-fired brown sugar. It's not quite a sweet caramel or something like that. In the very centre of your palate, definitely a little bit more of a well-fired brown sugar there. The further out from that you go, you get a little bit of a roasty, brown sugary note in there, which is very, very nice. I like how that kind of comes out. And the roasty black malt to this one, as I say, is just forming the whole linchpin of the beer. When you come a little bit further forward on it, I think there's a little, just tiny touch of a woody flavour to this one. When you come further forward in your palate, there's a little bit of that there. There's almost a tiny little bit of a kind of nutty flavour in there as well. The malt base, I think, is pretty straight up in this, but it's just something that goes together very, very well. In the back corners of the palate, you've got that nice, strong earthiness there, and it's a very distinct English hoppy earthiness that you get out of this beer. It's just a little bit darker than you would get from the likes of the German noble hops and things, but when it smooths out a little bit, there's almost a little bit of a herbal kind of quality to this beer. And then at the very front corners of the palate, there's a little touch of a floral note there, and round the very front curve of the tongue, it's just a little bit lighter and grassy. And of course, behind the front curve of the palate, that's where you get that nice oily bubble where these juicy fruity esters start to come out, and the mosaic is really quite interesting in this. Yeah. So with this one, there's definitely a little bit of that kind of citrusy, grassy sort of thing, which will be coming from the Bramling's Cross. It has that grassy sort of citrus element to it, but it's almost like a very, if you think of the Terry's chocolate orange, but the dark chocolate one, if I'm remembering right, that's the red one. It's it's the very dark blue, but the very dark Terry's chocolate orange. I don't know if you even get those in Sweden, to be honest. But the very dark chocolate, the orangey flavours, the orangey esters which are coming from the mosaic in this, really give this kind of orange infused chocolate sort of flavour to the beer. And right on the tip of your palate, there's a little bit of some blueberry coming out, which again is another element that you'll get from the mosaic in this one. It's really just interesting how everything in this beer goes together, but it certainly works very, very well. I'd love to try a few more of the darker beers from Kernel Brewery, and of course it's one that I wish had been a little bit more widely available to me, because they do a lot of different stuff. If you want to educate yourself in beer tasting, you know, Kernel Brewery are a very, very good one to go for, because they're always changing hops and malts and things like this, so you can try beers of the same style but just with different hops, and you can see how that affects the flavour. So in terms of beer education, you know, that's where I would recommend Kernel, but the standard of beers that they're putting out is very, very good as well. But yeah, I just like how all this whole thing is going together with this beer. The further and further into the flavour I go, the more the malt base gradually sweetens up. You get more and more chocolate out of it, and the juicy notes from the fruit start to push out a little bit more as well. But I'll say, very, very solid beer this, and I certainly wouldn't hesitate to drink it again. In terms of the mouthfeel of this one, mid-bodied beer, maybe pushing full-bodied actually. It's at the top end of mid-bodied for me. Carbonation is very, very smooth. The mouthfeel overall, it's got a little kind of slightly smooth edge to it, but at the same time it's got a little touch of the oiliness that you'd like, and that helps kind of balance out some of the roasty black malts in this beer. It's got a roasty black malt, but very, very smooth on the other side of things. There's a good bit of bitterness to this one. I would guess it's somewhere around the 50, maybe even 60 IBU mark. Some of that coming from the malt base, some of it coming from the hops as well, but juicy fruity qualities as well, which is really nice. And you know, everything in this beer, it just goes together very well. This is very much a beer where it's all about how these flavours kind of complement each other, and it works very, very well. So I think, to be honest, that's a good way to sort of sign off on this beer. It's got that kind of dark chocolate, Terry's chocolate orange sort of thing to it, which I think is very nice. So have a go at this beer for yourself and just see what you think. And this is a brewery, as I said, that I would recommend to you if you are particularly interested in sort of sensory education, if you like, because they always do these same beer styles just with different hops and malts and things like that. So the Kernel Brewery are one that are very good to teach yourself about beer tasting, so bear that in mind. But yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. This has been a really interesting beer, and it's cool to see more of these English beers reaching Sweden and coming through the small parties and Systembolaget. But yeah, really impressed with this one, and I hope you guys have enjoyed my take on this beer. So once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from the Kernel Brewery in London as well. As I say, you know, they've got a very high output of different things. But thank you once again for watching, and I will catch you guys very soon. This was the India Double Porter Mosaic and Bramling Cross Edition from the Kernal Brewery in Bermondsey in London. A really, really nice beer. Very kind of, it's got a good typical English backbone to it, but it's got a little bit of that kind of New World thing that you would expect from the American craft beer. So a very good blend of sort of new and old, this one. So check it out for yourself and just see how you get on. But yeah, thank you again for watching, and I will catch you guys very soon. Make sure you check out some of these Kernal beers. Slàinte, skål.